In some ways, October 1st, 2017 seems like last week. And in others, it seems like years ago. Of course, the FBI has discovered virtually nothing with regard to what actually happened and why. And I'm joined today by two very special guests, welcoming back to the show, Joe Napoli. Joe, hello.
Hey, Jason, how's it going?
It's going very well. It's been too long, Joe. I miss you, man.
Yeah,
How's things?
Things are good. Things are really good. Thanks for asking. How about yourself? How's the weather back there?
I know you've been sort of re-terrorized not that long ago by the incidents in Thousand Oaks, California. Obviously, you and your wife are still recovering from the tragic and traumatizing incidents that occurred while you guys were at the Route 91 Harvest Festival, a concert that you and your wife and friends have attended for many years in a row. Joe, you were the first person to alert me that this Las Vegas shooting was happening. You called me, I think it was probably maybe 1 a.m. in Vegas and about 4 a.m. in New York, and I was really shocked to hear the news.
Yeah. We were on lockdown at the Tropicana when I called you, and then I think I called you again when we made it out of the Tropicana into another friend's room at the MGM, because we were staying at the Mandalay Bay, and they wouldn't let us back in until they swept through everything, every room, every square inch of that hotel. And I remember getting back to our hotel, and you could just see that everything had just been swept through, picked through.
Your own personal room, they went through all your stuff?
Oh yeah. For sure.
I'm not sure I knew that.
Yeah. And it was probably the dirtiest feeling I think I've ever had. Excuse me. And so we got out of there quick. We just didn't want to be there. It was awful. Obviously for what had happened the night before, but it's just an overwhelming feeling of just dark, dirty, sinful violation, just
betrayal by your own government,
sure.
Joe. You law enforcements are in there looking through your stuff after you've been nearly killed. And now the FBI has closed the case. Every room.
I'm sorry, what?
Well, and now the FBI has closed the case so that you, your family, the victims of the shooting have no sense of justice, no sense of closure. We've heard that it's, what's his name, Stephen Paddock from the room there shooting. But Joe, we're fortunate today to be joined once again by John Cullen. John, how are you?
Awesome.
Very well. Thank you, Jason. Hi, Joe.
Hey, John. How's it going, man?
Glad to have you. There's been a lot of controversy about some of John's reporting. People are going to recall, of course, when John came on the show with Jake. And of course, it was my intention to have two of what I thought at the time were the best investigators into this crime to come together, not to fight each other, but to compare notes and to test theories. Because obviously, if one person is saying that Stephen Paddock acted alone, firing from the room, and another is saying that an extremely elaborate conspiracy involving the Saudi Air National Guard, Kingdom Holdings, which owns 45% of the Four Seasons, a boutique hotel within the Mandalay Bay, the top 4 floors. That is what we're going to discuss today. There's simply no way that both theories could be correct. And I think a lot of people, Joe, find problems with this notion that Stephen Paddock planned this, brought all these guns up to his room by himself, planned to shoot up the concert with 27 different guns, one man firing out a window for no known purpose, no clear agenda. And then he killed himself by shooting himself a couple of times. And the 3 hookers that were in his room left. And Jose Campos got shot in the leg. That probably is what happened, right, Joe?
Yeah. With the way that door looked in the hallway, I guess his legs would have looked like Swiss cheese, from what I understand. And didn't the FIT report say that there was no exit wound in Paddock's skull, but the FBI recovered the bullet that was the same bullet that he killed himself with?
John's going to be our expert on the FIT report. What did the FIT report say, John?
Regarding the bullet, the suicidal round, that's in the autopsy of Paddock. And the autopsy, you're right, Joe, it says that there was no exit wound, but that the round was recovered from his, from his brain effectively. So, yes, there was no exit wound.
Right. And we've been having some really impressive experts join us throughout the course of the more than 1 year since this occurred, Joe. We've had Dr. Thomas Rudd, we've had various investigators. So, we've been really trying to get to the bottom of this. And certainly, speaking for myself, I have no interest in being right or saying, hey, this was the first theory we had, so we have to defend it. I just want to know what went on. And, John, I first contacted you after you had created a video about Frank Muth, a U.S. Army general who was the head of a program that was intended to train the Saudi Air National Guard. Give us a little background on Muth, if you could.
Sure. So it's actually called the Saudi Arabian National Guard. So it's SANG, and it's not Air National Guard. I don't think it's Air National Guard. I think it's just Saudi Arabian National Guard, SANG. Okay. And the U.S. Army has a program called the OPM, Office of Program Management for SANG. And it's been in existence for many, many years. And effectively, it's the branch of the Army that teaches our allies how to use the weaponry systems that our manufacturing companies make. So if they buy something from Lockheed or Hughes or Martin Merrick, Boeing. So they're buying these systems from these companies, and then the Army teaches our allies how to use it, and we charge them for that. So it's a revenue generating operation. It's like a sales operation.
Well, it's part of the military industrial complex, isn't it?
Right. There you go. So what we're doing is the U.S. Army sells training and ongoing this and that as part of this operation. So this Major General, then two-star General Frank Muth was running an operation with over 200 people, and they are servicing the Saudi Arabian National Guard, basically teaching them how to use the stuff that we sell them.
Yeah, it's pretty astounding. And so basically you created that video that revealed Frank Muth and spoke about the Saudi Arabian National Guard, the training operations. Right. Now, tell us about what was going on with the Saudi military components that were there in Las Vegas prior to the shooting.
Well, there are some trainers. There are some helicopter trainers that they left behind for training purposes that are owned by the Saudis, but they're not in Las Vegas. They're in Mesa, Arizona.
That's these Boeing
AH-6Is. Yeah.
AH-6I. Right.
Yeah, the little ones, the little guys.
And these are designed to be very maneuverable, very stealth, and to actually have commandos seated in them that can be heavily armed. I'm showing one right now that's got some huge machine guns on the side. That's not what we're proposing was present, but this is a very maneuverable, very quiet type of helicopter that can position basically operatives in these seats facing outward, as many as 4 commandos firing guns out the open doors.
Right. So they own these helicopters, and that's how the Saudi theory developed. The Saudi hypothesis came from, you're looking for means, motive, and opportunity. The FBI and the LVMPD did not deliver a motive. Right? They both said we can't figure out the motive. But what I challenged was the opportunity. I looked at Stephen Paddock in room 32135, and along with Shepard Ambellis, who was really the first to break it, said the window in 32135 isn't broken. And the officer who goes up to the window and pulls the curtain back isn't mentioned in the FIT report as being part of the team. So his name is Brett Brosnahan. By the way, Brett Brosnahan just this past week was involved in an officer-involved shooting, along with Levi Hancock. This is Levi Hancock's second officer-involved shooting since October 1st. So he's had 2 of these so far, and this one, the guy was killed this week. So
wow.
Brett Brosnahan and Levi Hancock were involved in an officer-involved shooting this week in Vegas.
Wow, John, you are so on top of this. I have to say, at this point, there were people who doubted you when we did this show with Jake, and people who said that you were working for, various disinformation operations. But time has shown that there's no one who has remained as dedicated to uncovering such detailed evidence about this Las Vegas event. There's no one but you who has done that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
For sure.
The motive that I have is just to get to the truth. I didn't know where it was going to lead. In the first week or so, there was a whole lot of saber rattling going on between our government and North Korea. And when this event happened on October 1st, the World Series was getting ready to be played 3 weeks later, outdoors in Los Angeles.
Right.
So
I remember you were very concerned about that. Right.
Of course. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? They got away with this? I see the helicopters, right? I see them in the sky. I hear them. I've got the audio. I've got all this stuff. And I'm confident very early on that, I'm not hallucinating. I see what I see. They're there. Now, a year and 3 months ago, did I have false positive sightings? Yes, I did. Meaning I saw Maverick, didn't realize it was Maverick, but now with the body cam information that we've seen, we've been able to synchronize everything. So now I can tell you exactly, that's Sundance, that's the second Sundance, here are the Mavericks, and then there's this period of time between 10:05 p.m. and 10:12 p.m., but the real stuff is happening at about 10:09. And at 10:09 p.m., Maverick hasn't left yet. The Maverick helicopters are still on the ground. Sundance landed 4 minutes ago, and yet we see 3 helicopters in the air. And the 3 helicopters we see in the air are not behind Mandalay Bay, meaning not south of Mandalay Bay, in the airspace where they could be a jet taking off. I've discounted any aircraft I see in that airspace. The only aircraft we're looking at now are the aircraft behind the Luxor, between the Luxor and the Delano.
Right.
Meaning that can't be a plane taking off. That's too far to the west.
Right.
So and too far north. So we see 3 aircraft there. And given that we don't see the window broken in 32-135 and that there's no photographic evidence of the window being broken in 32-135.
You mean after the shooting? After the shooting is done, there's police body camera footage now that shows clear views of that room, and the window is clearly not broken. I want to remind the people who are watching right now that if they haven't been following John Hoover on YouTube, they can go to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. And John, you've posted really some of the most detailed videos on this topic that absolutely anyone has. You've got hundreds. How many videos have you got posted here?
Well, over the course of the last 15 months, I've published over 200 videos. Some of the older content I've since made private, just because it's not quite as accurate as I'd like it to be.
Right.
So, so some of the older stuff from the first couple weeks I've taken down. But I've published over 200 videos. I'd say most of this content is evidence-based, meaning all I'm doing is watching other YouTube videos and then assembling it, right? So everything that's in here I found on YouTube or found searching the internet, just internet-based research or YouTube content. And that's the crowdsourcing aspect of this that, you kind of provided the springboard for, which is, when we first met about a year ago on the Frank Muth thing, I don't remember how many subscribers I had, but it wasn't a whole lot. And then after appearing on your show and the Jake debacle, all that nonsense, my subscriber count shot up pretty significantly. Now today, I've got almost 13,000 subscribers.
That's great.
Right?
Yeah, that's great. As you said,
So-
this is the crowdsource method, John. You see, you have been met with some pretty persistent, I don't want to say it's been accurate or effective, but certainly persistent opposition. And it's my belief, John, that that's happening because you are closer to the truth of this matter than anybody else who's broadcasting on YouTube. And when I saw that Frank Muth video that you put up, I was so intrigued by the evidence that you had. Now, granted, when we went and looked at the videos that showed a helicopter in the sky, at that time, it was really just one video. There was a dot there. It was, I think it's fair to call it inconclusive. But since that time, you've persisted in not just pushing a theory because you like the theory, but in searching for more evidence, which would prove or disprove your theory, and you've come upon some really compelling additional evidence of helicopters in the sky.
It seems like every video that John has done, I mean, to say it's gotten better and better is an understatement, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
But how he links them together with the evidence and things that people haven't found other than John. Again, my opinion is amazing.
Yeah.
They're tough to watch, I'll be honest with you, and I think I've shared that with John on some of his comments that I've made on his videos, but they have to be watched.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And Joe, you raise a great point. This is part of the reason why I like doing these videos with John, where we actually have him on the phone and he's talking to us and explaining his videos, because you're right. These videos are a detailed collection of evidence. John has put them together in his unique, very, I think, slick way. And, you know, some people have criticized that, saying it's a psyop, but I understand what John is doing. He wants to engage people. He wants to create a signature. He's done that. He's got the music, he's got the style of the text and all that, but they are very detailed, these videos, and it's really almost become an evidence repository, this YouTube channel here. John has recently posted a municipal traffic camera that, where's the timestamp, John, where this thing shows the helicopter?
Right there. Yeah, you're there.
2:05?
2 minutes. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
There it is.
155,
Boom,
205.
right there.
Yep.
We see it.
Yep.
Okay. So you've got now multiple angles of. Let me go back there for people who might.
Was that the
have missed-
Tropicana? What was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was?
Go back to about 145. 145 is a good scrub.
Let's take a look.
Scrub to 145 or so.
Yep.
You'll see it. You'll see it fly basically over the Tropicana towards the MGM.
See it, Joe? That is clearly a helicopter. That thing's blinking and flashing and doing all kinds of stuff. Joe, have you ever seen that bit of footage before?
No.
Is that
I have
blowing
not.
you away?
Well, completely.
Okay, so for all
That
the people
is-
that said that John Cullen is making this up about helicopters, that's one. John, you did a really unbelievable and comprehensive overview triangulating the location of the helicopter based on the first video from the taxi driver, Corey, what's her name?
Corey Langdon, right? Corey Langdon.
Right, Corey Langdon, this municipal traffic camera, and what's the other camera that you used to triangulate the location of that helicopter?
Well, in Corey Langdon's footage, which also, she took a lot of heat. Right there you go, right there in Corey Langdon's footage. Let that play, you'll see the aircraft. So this was the first footage any of us saw, was the Corey Langdon footage. This came out before the Raymond Page footage, that came out before the Tall Ace of Spades footage.
Right.
And right in the first few seconds is this aircraft. But we didn't really understand the orientation, where she was, with, you know, what her sight lines were. And that's what we did in this video, was we built the sight lines, we built the 3D model, or, you know, used the 3D model on Google Earth to figure out, based on where she was, what direction is she looking, and then where's this aircraft. And then it turns out that this synchronizes with that municipal camera, and that's what you're seeing here. Corey Langdon's filming from the cab, and the camera up on top is the municipal camera on the pole at the intersection, and they're getting the same aircraft in the same airspace. And it's flying northbound, and there's nothing on flight radar. Flight radar shows absolutely nothing in the vicinity.
Wow.
And John, how were you able to get that video? Is that...
So this is part of the crowdsourcing. So there's a bunch of guys who've been going down to the metro on a weekly basis and getting the releases and then posting them up on YouTube for the rest of the investigative community.
Really amazing. And you see, John, I didn't invent crowdsourcing. Obviously, crowdsourcing has been around for a long time, but I did just happen to, sort of stumble on this process. And as you've said, I think it's invigorated a lot of people. And I think this is the reason why I am so persistently attacked, because the people that don't want the truth of these types of things coming out recognize that when 12,000 or 79,000 or hundreds of thousands of people put their thoughts, their resources, their access to random video clips together, we've assembled such an unbelievably powerful tool for solving crimes, revealing evidence, and getting everyone thinking about all these different factors that it is virtually unstoppable, and so they're trying to stop it.
Well, it's unprecedented.
Yeah.
All right. So this is history in the making, and that's not hyperbole.
I agree.
And what I mean by that is what we're living through right now. And by we, I'm talking about you, me, Joe, the rest of this investigative community, the people who survived through this. What we're going through right now is this crowdsourcing of justice, this crowdsourcing of discovery, where the evidence is being provided by the people who were there, the victims, and it's being investigated by civilians.
Right.
This has never when has this ever happened?
Well, it started, I think, with 9/11, but you got to remember, 9/11 was 16 years prior to this. Not every single person in New York City had a 4K video camera in their pocket in the way they did in 2017 at this concert. There have been so many videos that have been surfacing.
That's right.
And that's what allows you to do things like triangulate. We're no longer spitting in the wind. We are closing in on a theory. I mean, this is the way it works, right, John? I mean, this is how crimes get solved. People look at the evidence and start to try to put a picture together and start to try to build a narrative. And I appreciate that there are elements. You said most of the videos are evidence-based, and I believe what you mean by that is there are times where you begin to try to flesh out a hypothesis, and it does necessitate traveling down the road of speculation to some extent. We've got to look at the evidence and start to come up with literally a story that can explain what happened. So basically, you took evidence that your gut told you was strong, this helicopter, the one dot of light indicating a helicopter flying. Now, you've totally made that almost irrefutable with your triangulation and your additional video footage that shows that there are helicopters. Airplanes obviously cannot remain stationary in the air. There's tons. We've got this video that you've made, the most pivotal witness, Clarissa, who actually says she saw a helicopter with commandos hanging off the skids. Talk to us about Clarissa for a moment, if you could.
Well, she's clear, she's lucid, she's insistent, and she won't be denied. Clarissa says, look, in that moment, I knew these guys were shooting at us from the helicopters. Mm-hmm. And, there's something called normalcy bias. Normalcy bias is what you see in a lot of the videos, people saying it's the electrical system, it's just fireworks. People want things to be normal. And what our hypothesis is so heinous, it's never happened in the United States before, right? American citizens have never been gunned down by helicopters, I guess, except for maybe in Waco with, the David Koresh thing, if you want to use that as an example. But, in a public venue, we've never had helicopters flying in and gun people down. That has just never happened in America, right? And right, so normalcy bias kicks in. And normalcy bias kicks in even for the cops. The cops are getting shot at, and yet they cannot identify where the shots are coming from. They don't know. And we did one recently. We did a video recently. So Clarissa sees through this fog of war. Normalcy bias affects over 50% of the population. Mm-hmm. Okay? So she sees through it. She's clear. Now, there's other videos. If you go back to the channel list or something, there's one that we did recently with where it says the title. If you just go to the channel, the title of it is a Mark Twain quote about witnesses showing up. If you click on videos, videos instead of home. Yep. So the title is a Mark Twain quote about witnesses. Yeah, nothing spoils a good story like the arrival of a witness.
Right.
And right. So of an eyewitness. So that video has Clarissa and a whole bunch of other people who also. There's a woman who goes up to the cop and says, "Was it a helicopter?" Now, what would make her say that? So we've got a bunch of people who saw through the fog of war, who believe that the helicopters were shooting at them or that it was some sort of an aircraft. We've got people who said for a moment they thought it was a drone shooting at them. And again, that's normalcy bias, because you can't imagine that somebody in a helicopter is shouldering a gun and trying to shoot you in the face. Mm-hmm. It's heinous. It's heinous. Right? And so then you have to ask, who in the world would do that? So when you talk about videos that I've made that have some speculation, one of my things that I did in my career in the past, I'm a bit of a statistics buff. Mm-hmm. I like statistics and studied it in school. And so the probability that the number of women versus the number of men that were killed, if it was at random, meaning if you're shooting a bump stock rifle into a crowd of
just
people.
Spraying, yeah.
Right, at night, right? People are running, it's a crowd of people, 20,000 people, give or take, 16,000, 20,000, whatever. Right. You're shooting into a crowd with a bump stock, spraying at night. You can't really target, right? So the results should be random. Right. Regardless of whether people are huddled.
But you've now presented police body-worn camera footage where the police officers themselves are remarking how strange it seems, the number of headshots.
Yeah.
Correct.
Tremendous precision.
I fell out of my chair when I saw that video.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So John has put together a body of work that assembles basically the most compelling evidence based on video evidence, photographic evidence, eyewitness testimony, the very footage provided by the Las Vegas Metro PD. Yet we had people, including Jake, come on this show and say that he called the Saudi Arabian embassy and that the prince was not there. They told him over the phone.
That's good enough.
Where the Saudi prince was. First of all, people need to understand how ridiculous of a notion that is. That's like calling the White House and asking them, where is Donald Trump? Actually, it's way less likely that you could find the location of the Saudi Arabian crown prince, because Donald Trump's location as the president of the United States is basically known every day. The Saudi news agency is controlled, and all the news in Saudi Arabia is controlled by the Saudi Arabian royal family. Now, I've had a tough time. Sorry, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to pose that the night of 1,000 Swords, November 4th, 2017, less than 5 weeks after the attack in Las Vegas, in Saudi Arabia, all these big shots are rounded up. Princes are rounded up, right? Members of the royal family. Al-Walid bin Talal is rounded up. Bakr bin Laden is rounded up, right? Big names. The Prime Minister of Lebanon is recalled back to Saudi Arabia, right? A lot happens. And it's all done under the guise of corruption. Mm-hmm. And the world falls for this. that this is under the guise of corruption. Now, again, I'm not being critical. I don't want anybody to think I'm throwing stones. I'm a big fan of the bin Salman family and what MBS is doing, and his brother KBS. I'm a big supporter. His older cousins wanted to kill him, and that's what went down. They were trying to kill him, and his brother. And if 50 or 100 or 200 or 500 infidels die, all the better for the type of people who are doing this.
So let's address this for a second, John, because I'm showing an article right here about, I don't know MBS. I can't make a personal judgment about him. I think Saudi Arabia in general is a country that does a lot of things that are maybe not the way I'd like things to be done. But here we've got this article from November 7th, 2017, that's saying that the Saudi crown prince has vowed to lock up 9/11 conspirators. And frankly, I don't need to know anything else about the guy to know that I want that to happen.
Right. Well, you're talking about the same families now 16 years later, right? So the guys who were financing it, and I think most of the people who are listening are probably familiar with 28pages.org, right? That was the
28-page Senate Intelligence Committee report compiled by Bob Graham and his Senate Intelligence Committee that he was calling for the release of for basically 15 years. Many people don't recall or even know that that was released in 2016, and it names Bandar bin Sultan, his wife, and a third Saudi diplomat as having wired over $100,000 to the 19 individuals, or some large portion of those 19 individuals, to finance their apartments, to pay for the flight school, and most importantly, they co-signed for the rental of the apartments. Now, Joe, you have a young daughter who's just entered college. She was born in the United States. She can speak English. If she went to rent an apartment, perhaps this has already happened, would they do that? Do they rent apartments to 19, 20-year-old people who have no jobs? Or would she need somebody like you to co-sign as a guarantor for something like that?
She would need, unless she was working full-time, I mean, you can work full-time and go to school, but she needed a co-signer for sure. She just didn't have the financial wherewithal and so forth. And
that's reasonable. But someone coming from a foreign country with no job and no ability to speak English and no money in the bank certainly could not rent an apartment. So it's another one of these situations where we start to look at all the details, and the story as given doesn't make any sense. Now, John has also brought to my attention this article from The Guardian. This goes back to 2015, where some unnamed, in this article, Saudi royal is calling for regime change, specifically wanting to get Saudi Arabia's King Salman, who remains the king, whose son is Mohammed bin Salman, some unnamed Saudi Arabian royal here, who's just a prince, one of the grandsons of the state's founder. Who are we talking about in this article here, John?
Well, it's hard to say exactly who this is that wrote this letter, but he's speaking on behalf of, I call them the cousins, right? They're all related. They all have the same grandfather. This is Al-Walid bin Talal. He's one of the senior guys. We've got, Mohammed bin Nayef. We've got Maiteb bin Abdullah. There's Mansour bin Mukran's father, Mukran bin Abdulaziz, I think is his last name. A lot of these guys over the course of the last 10 or 12 years at one point were the crown prince, meaning they were in line for the throne.
Right.
And they all got skipped over for the 31-year-old MBS.
Right.
2 years ago, right? Or, when his dad took the throne. And then after bin Salman took the throne, one after another, various crown princes were pushed aside. And that, the guys who got pushed aside said, wait a second, he's going to give women the right to drive. He's going to let them wear jeans. He's going to say you don't have to wear a hijab. He's, he wants to make Saudi Arabia a whole lot more like Dubai so that it can attract global travelers and global investments and things like that. Right. And the old guard, the Sunni Wahhabis, the really, the real hardcore guys are against it. And in a recent video that we did, we've got a clip of John Lear giving an interview. John Lear, the pilot, Air Force pilot, CIA pilot, highly decorated.
Yeah.
All right, but he basically says the same thing, whether you trust him or not. Again, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Mm-hmm. And he says, Mohammed bin Salman, we rescued him, we saved his life, we got him out of there. So even he is
wait, John Lear is saying we got Mohammed bin Salman out of Las Vegas?
Yeah.
Okay. So that brings me to the next point, because very early on, we identified this photograph of a guy who's named Jason Buff. Is that it?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So early on, I said, hey, wait, this is just a photo from the video, but it shows this really motley entourage. This guy here with the mohawk, who doesn't certainly look like other members of the Las Vegas Metro PD. We've got mixed uniforms in terms of the equipment that they're using. This woman has no body armor. This seems like a pretty standard Las Vegas MPD patrol uniform, whereas these guys are wearing heavy body armor. We see helmets. We see additional equipment. So this doesn't seem like a cohesive unit so much as a bunch of...
It wasn't. It wasn't. So we see this. So what's interesting about this photograph is now we see this event taking place minutes earlier. So basically, if you were able to hit the rewind button and say, go back 7 minutes and show me this crew assembling, I can show you them drinking water and assembling before they do this sweep. And we have the woman's body cam and one of the other cops' body cam. We have in one of the videos. So we see this group assemble, we see them get together, and you're right, it's a ragtag group. They basically, there was a guy upstairs, I think it's room 5224, that was shot in the head. And they just came from his room. They just came from his room, and they're taking him out to get medical assistance. But I think he came back from the concert after getting hit in the head. So he was shot. The guy
in the room. Oh, yes, right. I remember that video.
Right.
So there's a lot of material that people can really mine the John Cullen, the John Hoover YouTube channel to find. People who really want to dig into the facts and details of this Las Vegas shooting can spend days on this YouTube channel, and it looks like your subscribers are already going up. So people need to dig into this information. But the reason why I wanted to show that Jason Buff photo is that, for me, that was where, a lot of people started this rumor, oh, that's the Saudi crown prince because he's walking through and it's, this big entourage. And, we now know that, of course, it's not the Saudi crown prince. It's a guy who works as a security officer here at Tropicana. And this photo shows us, an inset of Mr. Buff playing baseball. And what we're told is that he's playing baseball at 10-something at night, and they call him off of the baseball diamond, tell him to drive or somehow transport himself down into the middle of a live fire situation to basically arrive at the hotel for some unknown purpose. We've got basically every Las Vegas Metro PD officer, every member of the SWAT team, every on-duty member of security at the Tropicana, and every other hotel responding to this situation. But for some reason, this guy, in his shorts and with his baseball glove allegedly in this bag, it's not a 9mm or a Desert Eagle or some sort of sidearm that he would carry with him as a last-ditch self-defense thing. This is his baseball glove that he didn't leave in his car in the parking lot when he came into work. And it's just a total coincidence that his build, his facial structure, his height, his body type are almost identical matches to the Crown Prince. And it's also just a coincidence that it is a known regular practice in the Arab world to use these body doubles, frankly, in the Western world as well. Lyndon Johnson famously used them. Hillary Clinton has been accused of using them. It remains my gut feeling that this individual is put in place because he is a doppelganger for the prince, part of his security detail, intended as a decoy when the prince is being transported around so people don't know where he actually is. And that is why this specialized team that seems to include possible mercenary-looking people, first aid people, this dude in a suit. I mean, what the hell are these guys doing here in the Tropicana? Of course, the prince would never step foot in the Tropicana. It's one of the oldest remaining hotels on the Strip, and it's not where you would find Saudi royals. But it's certainly conceivable that a guy who just happens to look like the prince works in security at the Tropicana, and when the prince decides he's going to travel to Saudi Arabia, somebody like this suit-wearing guy could be part of a team that's designed to find a bodyguard who looks as close to the prince as possible. But let's put that to rest, because that is speculation. Now, John, you have put together even more evidence supporting this Saudi Arabia. Basically, what we're getting at is there's a civil war going on in the Saudi Arabian royal family. Everyone knows that.
Correct.
And take us through some more of the evidence that addresses this notion and why you came to think this a long time ago.
Well, again, it was evidence-based. The evidence that I had was telling me that this is an aerial attack. And so that led to who could possibly do it and where would they get the resources from, right? One of the conversations, one of the threads was that it was ISIS. But ISIS, as I think of ISIS doesn't have helicopters. ISIS has Toyota pickup trucks with machine guns in the back. They don't. Yeah, they don't have helicopters, right? They got a lot of Toyotas. So ISIS to me wasn't a fit, but when I realized that there was this Saudi National Guard training thing about 150 miles away with a bunch of helicopters, it's like, well, we know these guys have got rogue
what's the name of that that air
NASA.
base? Nellis?
It's the Boeing.
Nellis.
No, well, Nellis is the air base, but that's not where the helicopters were. The helicopters are at the Boeing Mesa, Arizona helicopter plant.
Oh, that's good.
Right.
Yeah. So the irony there is, guess who works at the Boeing Mesa helicopter plant is Douglas Haig.
Oh,
Douglas Haig
really?
is the guy that So he's the guy that was selling fancy bullets. So how do we get So how do we end up with that guy who works at this facility? And this, by the way, this is one secret facility, boy.
This is Boeing in Mesa, Arizona. We can see. Right
Yeah. This is where they make the good stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
So
you made the connection with the Saudi Air National Guard, and you've backed it up with all of these things. The video from Frank Muth. Talk to us for a minute, if you could, John, about the Saudi Arabian holiday of Ashura and how that ties into this.
Well, I was curious if October 1st, 2017 had any significance, if the date itself was meaningful. And I started to look into that, and I said, all right, is it meaningful on any other calendars besides the Gregorian, Judeo-Christian calendar? And lo and behold, I find that October 1st, 2017 is Ashura. And Ashura in Islam is the equivalent of, I think, the Jewish holiday of Passover. Basically, it's the celebration of Exodus, of Moses leading the Israelites
Jewish slaves out of Egypt.
Right, exactly. And so
this is sort of like Passover from the point of view of the people who are pissed off about it.
Well, no. In fact, I think what you'll find is that the Muslim folks who are believers, Muslim believers, and Jewish believers, there's a big overlap in the Old Testament.
Absolutely.
I think both religions share the Old Testament. So all of this stuff having to do with Ashura and Passover, I think it's almost identical except for when they celebrate it and the names of the various stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the celebration of Moses taking the Israelites out of Egypt. Right. And so the symbology of, we've got the Sphinx and we've got the Luxor pyramid. And this is happening on Ashura, which is the holiday that celebrates the Exodus from Egypt. To me, that's like, really, that's a pretty big coincidence.
I agree with that. So what you're talking about, of course, John, is that right outside the Mandalay Bay Hotel, just right next to it, actually, of course, is the Luxor Pyramid. And Joe and his wife and the other members of the audience were in the concert venue, which is, I believe, right here. Can you see it on the screen?
To the left, my pin. You see the green?
Here. Yep, there it is. So it's right in front of the Luxor, right in front of this pyramid. And it was interesting to see, let me get this into a position where we can look at it properly here. So people were standing there in the concert, basking right in the glow of this pyramid, right in front of this obelisk.
Right in front of it.
Right in front of the Sphinx. Tremendous symbology right here of this blood sacrifice on the holy day of Ashura. Talk to us for a moment, John, about this history of violence on the day of Ashura.
So it turns out that Ashura is a fairly violent holiday. And if we scroll down a bit, you'll see some dates where again and again and again,
1994, bomb. 2004, bomb. 2008, clashes between Iraqi troops and a Shia cult. 2009, explosion of a bomb. 2010, detention of 200 Shia Muslims at Shop House. We got 2011 explosion of a bomb, 2011 suicide attack, 2015 3 explosions. So it's not, I think that someone like Quinn Michaels would say once is random, twice is a coincidence, three times is a pattern, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times is basically a tradition.
Yeah, I think if you scroll down, they've got a whole list down on the bottom of the page there in Wikipedia. There's a whole list of dates. And things, and stuff that's happened. It's
I would say that's
pretty
a pattern for sure.
Pattern, Joe.
Right. So So it's a
violent
holiday. It's a violent holiday, and the holiday's significance is it's about the Exodus from Egypt, and so I think the Sphinx and the Pyramid of Giza is, pretty.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, and yet the mainstream media, nobody did any of this research. Nobody asked this question. Nobody decided to, try and peel the onion back just a little bit more, which is really disappointing. So I think, the theory that it's ISIS, I think it's really close. I mean, if I was standing in a room with 3 ISIS commandos and 3 Al-Qaeda commandos,
you would not be able to tell the difference. It's one and the same.
Right. But at the end of the day, I think what I'm saying is this was funded by the same families that funded September 11th. The families, the people that were in the 28 pages, that all the redaction that's in there. This is them 16 years later, and their next generation. Their sons are now in their 40s. And so it's that next generation, and basically it's kill or be killed over there.
And that's why ISIS and Al-Qaeda, I mean, some say it'll never go away for that very reason, John. I mean, they keep having children, and their children are being taught this way of life. It's just you want to talk about a pattern.
And factions, Joe. Obviously, we've got the royals, but then we've got their Confederates. And of course, there was a huge dust-up made over the murder of alleged journalist Jamal Khashoggi, pictured here, of course, in the 1980s with Afghan jihadis of the Mujahideen. The guy's holding an RPG, and he's rolling with Al-Walid bin Talal. He's not a journalist. He's the son of one of the most famous arms dealers, prominent Saudi. This guy's up to no good. And I think that his murder was somehow linked to what happened on October 1st in Las Vegas, Joe. What do you think of that?
Unbelievable. So the same family that funded 9/11 funded this.
Families, multiple
Factions within the Saudi
Right.
royal family. And we're not saying that 9/11 was completely a Saudi operation. Again, I think it's quite clear from multiple
important
points of evidence that 9/11 was one of the most sophisticated operations ever carried out. Yes, there were elements of Israeli Mossad. There were elements of the CIA. There were elements of Saudi intelligence. I'm convinced George Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Robert Mueller, all of these different people were involved covering it up, providing the necessary technology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it makes sense that this much secrecy surrounds what went on in Las Vegas, Joe, because if the people of the United States learned that a program created by the U.S. Army to train Saudi Arabia in the United States resulted in a rogue splinter operation where Saudi military personnel and Saudi helicopters fired on U.S. civilians in a U.S. city. That would be devastating to the national psyche. That would be devastating to the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States. And of course, that is a critical relationship because of this wicked, unsustainable system of the petrodollar. But look, the fact is, if the relationship with Saudi Arabia exploded in the way the World Trade Center did on September 11th, we basically would be facing the utter collapse of the U.S. economy. So I think it's fair to say that Donald Trump as the president has been served, I'm sorry to say this, but a shit sandwich. And he's trying to put enough mayonnaise on it that people can not taste the saltiness.
And yeah, MBS is trying to save face, right? The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia doesn't want the people to know about attempts on his life, right? So he is asking the president, he's asking Jared, please keep this quiet, right? They don't want, in the Khashoggi video that we made, we show that there was another attack, I think it was in April, in Riyadh on one of the palaces that they said was just
there were
drones.
many.
That's right.
MBS was actually injured by gunfire. So there's been persistent...
That was one of the theories because he hadn't been seen for something like 4 or 5 weeks. And so one of the theories was that he was injured in that attack in Riyadh.
Right.
So, but they don't want to talk about it. Now that's on him. Again, I'm a big fan of how he's trying to modernize Saudi Arabia, but his desire to keep these attacks secret is what then is causing people to look at him askance. People look at him and say, well, what is with the Knight of 1,000 Swords? And he's arresting all these guys in the heavy hand with Khashoggi. If people knew what was happening, if people knew that Khashoggi was plotting to kill MBS, well, then maybe what happened isn't so... so
right.
And he's not a journalist, so we've been lied to about that.
But why the chopping? I don't mean to laugh at that at all, but if that's defense, Jason, I mean with the malicious and the anger.
Well, Joe, these guys make the Sopranos look like the Boy Scouts. Right?
Absolutely, you film it, you show the other cousins. You have a movie night, and you say, "I want to show you guys something. This is your nephew. Remember him?
Right.
Anybody else have any good ideas about Arab Spring? Anybody want to talk about Arab Spring anymore?"
All right. I want to shift our conversation, fellas, to manipulations of the news. And I want to come back to what Jake Morphonios did in our little mini summit with John and Jake. And this is not to bash Jake. There is a really serious situation going on, Joe. And John brought to my attention something called the State Department GEC. John, tell us what that's all about.
Well, I guess it sort of stems from the Smith-Mundt repeal.
The Global Engagement Center.
Right. So the Global Engagement Center kind of sprung up as a result of the Smith-Mundt Act repeal. And this allows the government now, doesn't just allow it, but funds it, provides a means to fund it, to produce propaganda to counter what the government decides is propaganda. So, and they're using social media. They're using YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and hiring contractors that they believe can influence, the
like
masses.
Mark Zuckerberg and Jack?
No. I'm talking about
no.
not necessarily Jake Morphonios, but people like that, YouTubers and Twitter influencers that we've all seen, some of which have come on this show. And when John has presented compelling evidence that now is only more compelling, that there was Saudi involvement. Now, here's the thing, John. In my view, okay, if I'm doing an investigation into something and someone calls me up and says, hey, I've got evidence that there's this whole other angle, I'm very interested in seeing that. For instance, when Laurel Everly contacted me and said she had rented a home from Imran Awan that had a shed with a light on in it and a high-speed internet connection going into it, I said to myself, wow, that's evidence of an off-site server linked directly to Imran Awan. There are YouTubers who have been very persistent in their effort to suppress that evidence. As a matter of fact, just today or yesterday, there's a YouTuber who made a video who wants you to believe that Andre Taggart is the only witness there. Why would that person want to direct us away from evidence of a server that could have contained stolen information? And when I drove that witness to the U.S. Capitol Police, they gave the evidence to the defense attorney. It's very strange how people want to cover that up. It's a very overt move. I look at these overt moves. Now, I can't seem to find the original Russian language article that Jake had originally used when he lied and said that the king and the crown prince were in Russia October 1st. He told us that the Saudi Arabian consulate in Washington, D.C. told him that over the phone. Joe, you called the Saudi Arabian consulate and they said they don't give out that information over the phone, and I confirmed it with a call of my own.
They basically laughed at me and said, why would we give you that information?
Of course. Now, Jake says he's got some kind of great super duper connections into Saudi Arabia. I don't believe that. But even if you did, they're not going to tell him. And they're certainly not going to let you tell people on YouTube if they told you that. Anyway, he used an article that said King Salman to lead high-level, or essentially this. This article was updated on October 2nd, I should say, 2017, and clearly it shows the king and Putin, and this would give someone the impression, potentially, that on October 2nd, 2017, the king of Saudi Arabia met with Putin. However, when you look closer at the details in this particular article, it says that this is a file photo from November 2015 of these two world leaders meeting at the G20 summit in Turkey, nothing to do with Russia. And at the time, I made a video about this. It should still be available. I had the exact news article that Jake claimed to prove that the king and the crown prince were in Russia. And when I translated it from Russian to English, it said the king will arrive in the coming days. So yes, it was published on October 1st, and a casual glance at it might lead someone to believe that the king was in Russia and that the crown prince was in Russia. But in fact, that article does not provide such evidence. And when we look into it further, we find articles that are available now which tell us that the king of Saudi Arabia did not arrive in Russia until, I believe, the 4th of October.
Nice
His
work,
visit
Jake.
to Moscow is the first time in Saudi Arabia's history that a monarch will visit Russia. And I have a few other articles here that confirm that he didn't arrive there until October 4th. There's no mention of him having Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, with him. And in fact, there is a very conspicuous hole in the schedule and any reporting of the location of Mohammed bin Salman. Here's an October 2nd, 2017 article from Reuters. And Joe, as I recall, the concert you went to began on a Saturday night, which would have been
Friday,
September 30th. And then overnight,
Friday, September 29th.
29th.
Friday, September 29th, Saturday the 30th, and there's only 30 days in September, and then Sunday was the 1st.
Right. So
That's
this
right.
is written October 2nd, which is going to be Monday, and it says the Saudi king is going to start his Russian visit on Thursday, many days after the concert.
Right.
You know, the folks who are listening, if you search for State Department GEC, what you'll see on their page, they have their mission statement, and what it says is that they can produce effectively propaganda. So this was the legislation that allowed this is the Smith-Mundt repeal. The Smith-Mundt Act repeal allowed this to happen. Now the GEC is the operation within the government that produces it.
Right.
Now, whether they're producing the content or they're hiring contractors to do it, it could be a blend of the two. But effectively, we've given our own government the permission to produce fake
didn't. Barack
news.
Obama did. Barack Obama did.
Well,
And we know they love plausible deniability. Ooh, the chat is getting attacked right now. Hang on a second.
Yeah, big time.
Let me address this. Someone is trying to deflect people away from what we're talking about, John. Why is that happening?
Why is my name in there?
So what I'm getting at is, this was a huge find that you brought to my attention, this Global Engagement Center. Let me read a little bit from here, and people can get an idea while I try to remove this chatter. Basically, it says that the Global Engagement Center is charged with leading the U.S. government's efforts to counter propaganda and disinformation from international terrorist organizations and foreign countries. Now, to me, this is something that causes me to think, could this possibly be the reason that a group of morons have spent the past 2 years trying to convince people that I am affiliated with foreign intelligence services? Because that would allow the justification of creation of propaganda to counter what I'm trying to say here on Crowdsource the Truth. People have said that I'm a Mossad agent, that I'm paid by Mossad, that I am working with the Ukrainian government, the United States government, all manners of stupidity that have never been supported by any factual evidence and are flatly untrue. The thing goes on to say that this was established in April of 2016. Pursuant to Executive Order 13721. And this is not the only thing that we've heard about that is charged with basically overseeing the creation of fake news. There's something that we recently did a great show about, a great show with Charlie Robinson about, something called NewsGuard, which is another one of these things that's controlled by the Council on Foreign Relations and basically all the scumbags that are producing fake news. They want to tell you that their news is real, and what we're talking about right here, despite it being supported by prima facie evidence, they want you to think that this is fake news, and so they resort to injecting stupidity into the chat. It's really quite pathetic.
Hey, John, Jason, can I ask
Please.
John just a quick question? As you have been posting these videos, and like I said earlier, the more you post, the better the videos get, in my opinion. Have you been harassed in any way? Has the level and the amount of harassment increased at all, or has it been the same, or not at all?
It's been pretty steady. So if you look across some of these other YouTube channels, the truth is that very few channels embrace that this was an aerial attack. In fact, it's really only Jason and Shepard Ambellis, as far as journalists, that have embraced it.
Yep.
And none of the other channels. And so most of the other channels, except for a handful of smaller channels that kind of sprung up from the group that were watching my videos and then said, I'm going to make some of my own to see, what I can see. So there's a bunch of those that have been supportive. But I'd say for the most part, the other channels say there's no helicopters. These are all airplanes, and that I'm crazy. So they've been, and in some cases, they've been malicious.
Yeah.
And then in other cases, it gets worse than that.
Yeah.
People thought that I was ridiculously stupid when I started talking about shell casings before entering the Tropicana. There were two women, I believe, about a year later. Maybe one of the two was before a year that came out, and basically mirrored what I had seen and what I had mentioned. So.
And of course, this morning, Joe, you've just seen now footage that seems to indicate there was a helicopter right over your position there.
I just cannot believe that. And if you remember, probably about an hour after being in the Tropicana, that long hallway there that you and I walked into, Jason, someone had heard gunfire, and everyone started running. I didn't hear it. My wife didn't. Our group didn't. But if 100 or more people are running in the same direction, we better do the same thing. And you start to piece this stuff together, and it's like me seeing the shell casings and me seeing the bodies in the intersection of Rito and Giles.
Right.
If those are police officer ammunition on the ground or shell casings on the ground, who are they shooting at? They're not shooting at Paddock from 0.9 miles away from the Mandalay Bay.
That's right.
Now, John's also raised the point, Joe, I mean, there's so much inconsistent evidence in this whole thing. This photograph from Paddock's room, I mean, for my taste, this looks way too staged. This is a panoramic photograph taken with such technical precision. If one of the members of the 21st Century 3D crew had done this for a virtual reality shoot, I would say this is perfectly executed. Taking multiple photographs and getting them to stitch together like this is not easy. And this is not the panoramic feature of an iPhone where you just scan the room with a phone. This is separate photos that have been digitally merged together. And the thing that's so telling, John, you've brought this up, the number of rounds alleged to be shot doesn't nearly match the number of rounds seen in this photo and other crime scene evidence there in room 32-135.
Well, this is, like you said, this is a photo that was stitched together from the photos that supposedly were leaked. The photos that were leaked were given to Jackie Heinrich. Jackie Heinrich is from Boston, but used to be in Las Vegas. And she got these 5 photographs that supposedly were the leaked photos. Early on, I didn't trust these photos. It seemed to me that they were available too quickly. They were kind of showing us what they wanted us to see.
Right.
And I don't know. I didn't put a whole lot of stock in it. And I was busy watching other footage and trying to find these tiny little dots in the sky. So I'm busy doing that, right? I'm not right. And there's a whole bunch of other guys who are looking at the room and worried about Paddock. So I just didn't really spend a lot of time on this. Later, when we got the police body cam footage, we see the footage from Bitsko. Bitsko is the canine officer who's got the body cam on that's kind of pointing up at his face when he goes into the suite. He's the only officer whose body cam we see inside 32-135. And in that footage, we do not see glass on the floor. No. And so if you go to the videos and you look, search for any of them, use the word window. Is the window broken? So I've got a whole bunch of videos about the window. So, yeah, that's a good enough one right there.
Right. I mean, there's so many elements of prima facie evidence that you've brought to people's attention. I don't understand why Mike Turber of 5x5 News is in the chat right now trying to convince people that this is not evidence.
I don't know. If you scrub halfway into this video, what you'll find is, see if you can get one of the things where the cop is walking up to the window as you're scrubbing.
Okay.
And so that cop is, the cop you'll see that goes to the window is Zebra 22. That's the helicopter footage where you can't see the broken windows. Maybe scroll back a little bit more, back to towards the beginning.
Yeah, we had a lot of stuff prepared, but this clip is not necessarily one of them.
Okay, that's all right.
Is this it right here? Can you see that?
Well, what this is showing, there you go. There you go. So as he goes to the window, is he standing on 1,000 spent brass shells?
Right.
And is the window broken? And if the window's broken, why doesn't he say, hey guys, here's the window, and pull the curtain? You know, nobody goes to look at it. Nobody's interested in it. So is he standing on a whole bunch of broken glass and 1,000 spent shell casings? It doesn't appear to be. And then when we look at the photographs, it doesn't look like the window's broken. These
John,
are.
do you think these guys know what they're walking into before they do?
No.
But
I don't
this
believe.
is not anything that I mean, this is speculation. We can't really draw any conclusions about what the individual police officers may or may not know. And I like definitely sticking to the evidentiary aspects of what John has uncovered. We can speculate, obviously.
I don't see evidence. I don't see evidence that the window's broken, right? So that's all I'm saying. I don't see evidence that the window in 32-135 is broken when the cops come in the suite. We do see gunfire coming from 32-134, the little adjoining room with the interior door. Mm-hmm. We see gunfire coming from there. So, and we've got an eyewitness saying glass is falling at 10:05 p.m.
You've got a police radio communication where they're alerting the officers that there's another broken window.
Correct. Right.
And I see evidence that somebody is persistently attacking the chat with a new username every time I block. So I don't think they'd do that if we were talking about who's going to win the superb owl tomorrow.
Don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Well, all right, guys. So we're over an hour here, and I know that Joe is very busy starting his morning there in California. And John, of course, you are in Thailand still. I want to point out one other thing that Jake did that was very insidious. He attacked you, questioning whether you were actually in Thailand, speaking perfectly fluent Thai, which, I don't know, is he married to a Thai woman? That's an unusual language for someone living in North Carolina or wherever the hell he lives to be able to speak. But he basically accused you of being some sort of agent, working for the FBI, working for the CIA, not being in Thailand. But then almost the next day, he said he knew you actually were in Thailand. So why did he do that? Did he want to inject a false piece of information so that 20, 30,000 people would hear that and then make a retraction so he could legitimately say, oh, no, I took that back? But no one hears that retraction. We see this happening all the time, Joe. Well, they'll release some piece of news and then they'll retract it later, like this whole thing with BuzzFeed saying that, what was it BuzzFeed said that Mueller took back the next day. They put these things out there so that the thought gets planted in your mind. Then they retract it to say, oh, no, that didn't really happen. But everybody is still walking around thinking, Jake debunked John Cullen. That is not true. Jake falsified evidence to lie to the audience to discourage anyone from even questioning if there was any involvement of anything having to do with the Saudi Arabian royal family. I find that very curious.
Yeah, and the whole, calling the Saudi Arabia embassy and them verifying to him directly is got to make him look like the biggest joke.
Well, but the key lie, Joe, is that he said that was corroborated by news articles, which we now see is totally false. There is not one news article that existed then or now that definitively even alleges that the Crown Prince was anywhere. We have no idea where he was October 1st.
And he was so adamant when you had them both on. He was so adamant that John was wrong. He was talking over John, interrupting John, calling him out on everything that John had mentioned. And guess who looks like the biggest fool?
I just want people to focus, Joe, on these tactics. Why is George Webb Swigert so persistently attempting to deny the evidence that we discovered at 4809 Sprayer Street as recently as today or yesterday, telling everyone that he uncovered the only witness? He didn't uncover the only witness. There's another witness that he wants people who are listening to him today to forget about. Just like Jake did not get information from the Saudi Arabian embassy and did not corroborate it with news articles, but he wants people to think that. He wants people to listen to his version of the news, the propaganda that is legitimized by the Smith modernization, paid for by the State Department's Global Engagement Center, verified by NewsGuard, and then what we're talking about gets suppressed by every single idiotic thing, ranging from endless lawsuits from George Webb Sweigert's brother, from Robert David Steele, legal actions that go well beyond the lawsuits, live chat comments trying to suppress what we're talking about. If what we were talking about, gentlemen, was stupid, was wrong, the audience would realize that, and this information would die an unceremonious death, but it will not die. And I want to thank both of you gentlemen for that. I especially want to thank John Cullen, because he's brought this forward, Joe. You've showed tremendous bravery in persisting in the face of these incessant social media attacks, attacking your character, attacking your background, making your daily life even more unpleasant than this violent assault has.
Yep. I appreciate you having me on, Jason and John. Your work, your diligence, and commitment to this has not gone unnoticed, for sure. And I can't thank you enough.
Well,
Jason as well. I can't thank you enough as well, Jason, for fighting the good fight. This is
thank you, Joe.
More than worth fighting for. And
well, here's the thing, guys. I think it's important for you, Joe, to hear this. Now that the case is closed, we can file Freedom of Information Act requests, because it's not an open investigation any longer. So I think that the survivors need to demand more. That the U.S. government, that the FBI can deliver 2.5 pages and say case closed, we can't figure out the motive, when there's no evidence, by the way, guys. I mean, another show that we should do, it has to do with the bump stocks. There's no evidence that any one of these bump stock equipped rifles killed anybody, because there was no forensic testing done.
The ballistics aren't matched to the dead bodies.
Right. So with no forensic results, there is no evidence that any bump stock equipped weapon killed anybody.
Sorry, John, there was one other major piece you brought to my attention in our conversation last night that we should discuss, which is the sniper rounds found in the adjacent room.
Right. So room 32-134 had, they found 8 rounds in there, but those were 308 rounds. That's different from the 223-556 type round. So those are, higher powered rounds, and they only found 8 in 32-134. And we see a couple of those shots being fired on body cam.
Right. And the fact that there are 8 sniper rounds in one room would indicate that someone may have been targeting individual high-value targets in the crowd.
It's very possible, but the LVMPD FIT report says that they were firing at the tanks 8 times and hit the tanks twice, missed the tanks 6 times. So I did a video showing a guy in his 60s shooting a target at 1,000 yards and hitting it the size of a balloon. These tanks are 48 feet high.
Yeah, they're huge.
They're 48 feet high, 78 feet wide. You could hit one with the flu and a bug in your eye, and you could still hit the tank. Okay, so you're not going to miss them 6 times. It's the size of a 4-story apartment building.
Yeah.
You're not going to miss it.
Yeah.
The NRA target for shooting at that distance is 24 inches square.
Yeah.
This is 48 feet tall.
John, you've brought forward so much compelling evidence. It really, at this point, I don't see how anyone could, look, I get it, that if there's a question about something that's said, continue investigating it. And I'm not telling people to believe what John says and don't question it. Keep questioning it. I like the questioning. But what's happened over the course of a year, Joe, is that the more we've questioned John's evidence, the more he has refined it and the more accurate it has become. I definitely want to invite all of our viewers to visit the John Cullen YouTube channel and pore over what I'm going to go out and say is the most comprehensive repository of video evidence, the tightest hypothesis addressing the means, the motive, the opportunity, those involved. I think you've got it. I think John has come closest to solving this case, closer than anyone, Joe.
Yeah. And if I'm wrong, that's okay. If I'm wrong and somebody has evidence that says, did you know that El Chapo has 3 helicopters just on the other side of the border? I'd love to hear it. I'd love to see that evidence, right? I'd love to see a hypothesis B and a second set of possible suspects, but nobody's brought that forward. Everybody kept thinking it's just Paddock, but there's no photographic evidence that the window's broken, and there's no gunshot residue on his hands, and there's no forensics tying the weapons to the victim. So
and
I have to believe
with compelling evidence. Right. So people who do want to speak with John and have serious inquiries or new evidence, or certainly if there are witnesses out there who haven't come forward, you can follow John on Twitter. He is I am John Cullen, and certainly you can share your evidence with him. You can email it to me at truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org. People who are in the Southern California area or anywhere in the country who are looking to place executives in high-tech positions can contact Joe Napoli, and certainly any information related to the Las Vegas shooting. Anyone who just wants to send Joe a kind message can do that by following him on Twitter at JoeNapoli7. Joe, why don't you give everybody your website and the other information that they're going to need to get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, website is currently under construction, and it should be done by the end of February. But that's LaunchPath ES, and that stands for executivesearch.com, LaunchPathES.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well, and you can find me on Twitter.
And Joe really needs our support. He's working hard there in Southern California, placing people in executive positions. I do want to remind our viewers that Crowdsource the Truth is a community-sponsored news resource. If you're watching right now and enjoying this information, please remember that I cannot keep doing these broadcasts without your financial sponsorship. People can go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a monthly sponsor. You're going to get access to a lot of exclusive programming, and people who sponsor the show at $10 a month and higher are going to get the free official Sunday with Charles screensaver. The attacks based on false information and false allegations against me have had a negative impact on the financial sponsorship of Crowdsource the Truth. So I really do urge viewers that are watching right now and value this information, value this resource, please become a sponsor. You can also send a one-time sponsorship payment to paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. My guests today have been John Cullen of the John E. Hoover YouTube channel and Joe Napoli, brave survivor of the Las Vegas October 1st shooting, and all around nice guy. It's good to see you again, Joe.
You too, Jason. It's good to be on for sure. And it's good to hear from you, John.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thanks for joining me, fellas. I'm going to be back later tonight with an exclusive interview with Larry Klayman. Tune in for that. I'll be tweeting the time very soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.
See you guys.